In life, you're either famous because you're truly innovative and release something really special, or you create something that's a very good clone of that first guy. This is the latter of those two things. This is the Delux M800. There's been a lot of chatter, a lot of talk on Reddit about it being a 40 Singapore dollar Razer VIPER Ultimate. And we all know the Razer VIPER Ultimate is a really good mouse. It's basically one of the best wireless gaming mice out there. And honestly, if this can be like 80 or 90% of what a VIPER Ultimate is, that will already be impressive, because this is 20% the price of a Razer VIPER Ultimate. So I'm very interested to check it out, having seen all that hype. So I bought one and we're gonna unbox it today and check it out. Full review will be coming in like 2 weeks, so make sure you subscribe for that. But let's open it up. In terms of packaging, it's nowhere close to Razer, by the way. It's a cheaper box, it's terrible printing. It doesn't look good. But we don't buy a mouse for its packaging, we buy a mouse for, well, the mouse. So let's open it up and see what we get inside. It comes in this little plastic tray. We get extra mice feet, which is appreciated. We get a manual that tells us about the software and the specs, which I don't care about. And we get a USB-C cable. So this one is braided and kind of paracorded, very similar to the Endgame Gear XM1 cable style. Nothing wrong with that. Very, very nice. It's for charging as well as, well, using the mouse in wired mode if you so desire, which is good. And then we have the mouse itself. And first impressions, yeah, it looks like a Razer VIPER Ultimate. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you look at this, compare it to the pictures and all that stuff, it is uncanny how similar this is to the Razer VIPER Ultimate. It's very, very similar. But there are a couple of differences from what I've learned. Now, I've never used the Razer VIPER Ultimate or the Mini before. I've never owned one. I've tried it in stores, but I've never owned one. But here is what I can, deduce as differences. So number one, the side grips. There are rubber on the side grips now, which is something that's not present on the VIPER Ultimate or the Mini. So they did improve on the design a little bit. And number two, the logo is a bit different. And in terms of size, apparently this is a little bit smaller than the VIPER Ultimate, quite a bit bigger than the VIPER Mini. So it kind of slots in between the two products. So if the VIPER Ultimate is too big for you or too big in terms of price tag for you, this might be a decent alternative. Now, for a gaming mouse to be good, not only does its grip have to be good, it has to have decent specs on the internals. And this has that. I mean, the thumb buttons and the button behind the scroll wheel are pretty cheap feeling, they're pretty crappy, but they work. But what's important is that the left click and right clicks use Carl GM 4.0 red switches, which is properly impressive for a gaming mouse that costs 40 Singapore dollars. Those switches are very well known for very good performance, very good quality, and it's pretty consistent throughout. It doesn't have too much warp, it doesn't rub against each other like the Logitech G Pro. The scroll wheel is pretty well weighted. I would prefer if the click was a bit lighter on the scroll wheel, but apart from that, perfectly fine. Got a USB-C port on the front because yes, this has an integrated built-in lithium-ion battery, which is another very impressive feature about the fact that this is a $40 mouse. It charges and you don't have to swap out AA batteries and all that, which is a feature that you generally only find on higher-end gaming mice. But yeah, lithium-ion integrated battery is going to be good for weight, which this is quite light, by the way. This is quite a light mouse. On the bottom, of course, you find the mice feet as well as the sensor. The sensor is a PAW3335, which as far as you can tell is just a low power version of the 3389. So it's not as fast and not as super accurate as the Pixar 3389 sensor that is pretty much the perfect gaming mouse sensor. But it is still a pretty good sensor and it's been used in many other wireless gaming mice as well. And the reason it's low powered as well to save battery, because you're using a wireless gaming mouse. So apparently this sensor is pretty good. I haven't used it extensively yet to tell you how the implementation is on this particular model of mouse, because it's not just the sensor, it's also the implementation of the sensor that matters. On the bottom, you also find a slot for your wireless receiver. It slides in nicely, you plug this into your computer and it connects automatically. Very, very simple. Yeah, build quality wise, it's actually quite impressive. It's not super fancy, amazingly well built, but it doesn't rattle, it doesn't have any sounds. The clicks are not wobbly. The thumb buttons could be nicer, they're a bit clunky, but apart from that, generally the build quality is quite impressive for a 40 Singapore dollar gaming mouse. And this has RGB as well, so when I turn it on, it should have, yep, it has rainbow color RGB, which is another feature in a long list of features that you don't expect in a 40 Singapore dollar gaming mouse. So should you buy the Delux M800? I mean, I can't give you a conclusive answer yet because that full review will be coming in 2 weeks where I have extensively played like 100 hours of Valorant on it. Then I'll tell you whether this mouse is worth it, whether this mouse is a good choice, and I'll tell you all the different quirks and features. But if you're in a rush for getting a gaming mouse, I would say that this should be on your watch list because it is properly impressive. For 40 Singapore dollars, you do get quite a bit of gaming mouse for the money, at least from initial impressions. Who knows, it could break on me in like 3 days and then it won't be worth it. So make sure you stay tuned for that full review, especially if you can wait that 2 weeks. I would still say that this has genuinely impressed me, and it's a mouse that I am definitely going to be using as my daily driver for a good amount of time before I've come up with a proper conclusion. However, that's not it for this video. I want to talk about what this gaming mouse represents as a trend for the gaming mouse world, because it is quite interesting to talk about and think about. Because the trend of clone gaming mice, heavily inspired designs that were clearly inspired by some very popular mice that already exist from some very well-established brands. This is one example. Ponage mice is another example. It's a trend that's been happening for a while now, but it's just getting started. It's getting more and more popular to see clones of gaming mice pop up that look exactly like an XM1, that exactly look like a G Pro or a G303 or a G502 or a VIPER Mini or VIPER Ultimate. This is something that is happening, and this is something that is increasing and increasing and increasing. More clones and more stuff is entering the market. Now, this is caused clearly by modern manufacturing methods. For one, gaming mice are not the hardest things in the world to clone. As much as they can be unique and special and hard to design, they are not the hardest to clone, because once you get the shape right, you just need to fill in the gaps. But also because modern manufacturing methods means that these designs from these brands that are pouring millions into R&D, the designs just end up in the hands of these manufacturers anyway, and these manufacturers, being based in countries with generally more lax copyright and trademark laws, can then turn around and make watered down versions of this design for people who want to make clones or inspired designs for these brands who are trying to compete in the market. And because these designs didn't need millions of dollars of R&D to produce, that doesn't have to be factored in the cost, and that's how these clone companies heavily undercut these bigger brands who are designing their own things in terms of price, in terms of coming up with this design. Yeah, that's why the clone trend is happening. That's how it happens. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it actually depends on who you are. For a consumer, in my opinion, you might disagree with me. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. For a consumer, then it's a perfectly good thing. It just means cheaper mice, more options, more choices on the market. I'm not going to complain. But for someone who is a manufacturer, this is going to be a huge cause for concern, and how they react to it actually would heavily impact us as consumers. So for manufacturers, this is kind of a bad thing, clearly. I mean, it's going to affect the sales, that their clones are undercutting them in terms of price. So how do they handle this? Well, they can go one of two ways as far as I can tell. One, they're incentivized to double down on innovation, to create products that are so difficult to clone and copy and mimic, and be one step ahead of their imitators, and basically make products that are so difficult to copy that no one even tried. Vinyl Mouse is the best example of this. Their products, their new wireless gaming mouse, it's very hard to find a clone that's really as good as the Vinyl Mouse, because, well, it was designed so extremely, and it's crafted so extremely that what ends up happening is, well, the clones look at it and go, well, it's not financially feasible to copy that. It's not financially feasible to imitate that. And what ends up happening is no clones appear, and they're safe. They're one step ahead of them. They can't be touched. But another thing that could happen is that manufacturers are disincentivized from innovation because they realize innovation is not an efficient way to basically generate sales and generate market share and generate, keep on holding on to their consumers. And what ends up happening is that budget gets diverted into marketing and advertising, which is something that actually is happening. That's not to say that these gaming brands weren't doing great amounts of marketing and advertising to begin with. It's just that more types would appear, especially types that you would see that will make the product unique. And that is why I believe Logitech, Razer have been doing all these collabs with games, have been doing all these collabs in terms of unique colors, because they want to provide stuff that clones would never be able to do. And that is collaborations with their consumers' favorite games, with their consumers' favorite animes, with their consumers' favorite shows, characters, have it printed, all these unique colors and unique options that the clones don't have the skill and don't have the recognition and the connections to provide. And that's how they plan to stand out. Now, that's not to say Razer and Logitech are not innovating at all. They're still doing innovation, thankfully. But if the clone situation, the imitation situation becomes so bad that everything they release gets completely copied like within weeks of their release, then it might come to a point that gaming mice brands get disincentivized to innovate completely and just focus all efforts on marketing, on generating brand loyalty, on standing out based on looks, based on recognition, based on mind games and psychology, rather than standing out by having a better product. So in that case, then it won't be as good for consumers. So I I guess it's up to debate as to whether this whole clone situation is good or bad for us. I personally don't care. I'm just gonna enjoy cheap, fun gaming mice experiences while I can. I hope this video was enjoyable. I hope this video was thought-provoking in some way. I hope this was interesting and enjoyable. And if you did, make sure you like and subscribe, all that good stuff. All tech questions on my Discord and all opinions in my comment section. Follow me on Instagram, all that good stuff, blah, blah, blah. See you guys next time. Bye.